Okay, I think the other video went a little long. I might have just turned it off. We should be running. I saw it bleep 3 times. So it's been quite a month here at Wexford Farm. I haven't been able to film because Hurricane Helene came close enough. I wasn't affected by Hurricane Helene at all, never even lost power, but we were close enough that we were getting rain bans for about a week. So it was raining so often and so randomly that I couldn't really get my equipment out here to do videotape. Then I realized that probably the last 3 or 4 Wexford Training Barn videos I did, the sound went out. So I went and got new batteries. That was the problem. My apologies. I left all the training videos up there because there was some sound and I did the video. So I left those up there. What I'm going to start, I'll get back on track with all the horses in the barn. And what I'm going to start with is kind of where I left off with Rafalko. So we're going to work on walking to the metronome, wrong app. So I've got my metronome app. I am going to put the beats per minute on 60, which is where we were working quite successfully. And I chose 60 mostly with horses that have weak backs and hindquarters. I find it's between 60 and 70. Horses that rush a lot might need to start closer to 65 or 70. Horses that are choosing not to go very fast, like him, from our work on from straight on the circle and all that. No, we're not going backwards anymore. I know. You're very good for that little lesson. So we're actually just starting off cold. I demonstrated the video on backing up from the ground and backing up from the saddle before we did any kind of warm-up at all. And I haven't really been able to ride because of all the rain. I've been able to do more groundwork than riding. So even since the last video, I don't know that we've been able to do much with the metronome. So it's just as well there was no sound on the last video. And we're just going to see where we're at. So with the metronome, what I'm looking for is at walk and trot. I put the metronome on 2 beats, and I'm just following the feel of the hind legs. Right? This is going to clean up any straightness issues between the stride of the left and right hind leg that goes into the pelvic use as well as the back. And it's going to balance out the stride from the forward placement in the braking phase to the backward placement in the pushing phase. So the metronome is just in my pocket, and the metronome is for me. On 2 beats, what I'm trying to feel is each hind leg stepping in time with the beats of the metronome. And I'm just going to work on an easy figure 8. And at this point, the horse we're working with on tempo, because I'm now sort of the lead of the dance, and I'm asking him to follow me with some precision, a rhythm between braking and pushing, between too fast and too slow. What every horse has to do in order to maintain a very precise rhythm is they have to be able to adjust their stride length and their speed a little bit. So when I use the whip or my leg, I'm asking for more energy, not necessarily more miles per hour. I'm asking him to pick the foot up quicker, right? When I use my back or the reins to bring him back into the tempo if he gets ahead, then I'm asking him to maybe shorten the stride a little bit or increase the braking use of the back and hindquarter muscles. That braking use is the resistance to his body weight falling forward, as well as the resistance horses use to maintain a rhythm, right? And this neck curling is part of what's taken his rehab a while, because whenever I use pressure on 2 reins, which I need to do if I'm working with tempo because it's a precision thing, then pressure on 2 reins has a tendency to make him over curl his neck, chomp on the bit, get agitated, and drop his back. So you'll see every once in a while when he does that, that's just his oldest habit. When he's lightly on the contact, it's because he feels stable through his hindquarters and back and doesn't mind the little bit of bit pressure that I might have to use to keep the tempo. So pretty good. This is a new exercise for Rafalko, and I think we've only done it maybe 4 or 5 times now, and he hasn't been ridden probably in at least 2 weeks. So we're just coming out cold. We've got what we've got. And what I'm focused on is everything I feel in the saddle and behind me. So on the turns where he has to shorten the stride a little, horses have a tendency to lose energy. On the straight lines where they naturally lengthen the stride a little, they have a tendency to go a bit faster, too fast. So all the way around my figure 8, what I'm looking for, even as I let the stride length adjust, I'm just looking for each hind hoof to sort of land with the beeps, right? Sometimes I have to push, sometimes I have to use, well, I use what I call a half push and a half halt. So if he doesn't already slow down easily from my back, with very light rein pressure, then I can't use a half halt. If he doesn't go forward easily from my leg or a light touch with the whip, then I can't use a half push. So working with a metronome and developing a consistent tempo requires that you kind of already have some of the basic aids light, or the horse stable enough, that I should say, that the basic aids are light and the horse can respond. So there I'm going to push where he has a little trouble. Ask him to quicken the stride, but not necessarily lengthen the stride. And when I begin working on the precision of tempo, I try to choose a tempo that's just close to the natural speed that the horse is offering. So if they're a little bit rushy and quick, I'll up the tempo a bit. If they stop a lot or they tend to be slow, I'll keep the tempo very slow. Because the work is in the equalization. It doesn't really matter if the tempo is slow or fast, and quick tempos can be a little more challenging than slow tempos for horses that lack forward energy. And how did I just say that? Anyways, you want to pick a tempo that's sort of close to what the horse would choose walking around on a loose rein. Because just getting the precision of each, and you can see he nails it, he loses it, he nails it, he loses it. And it's the whole time I'm either giving a little bit of push or a tiny bit of a half halt, a little bit of brakes. Because the precision itself is what balances the whole pushing mechanism of the horse and the whole braking mechanism of the horse. And so rhythm is a combination of tempo and beats. The tempo is the space between the beats. So a walk is a 4-beat gait, but to try to match all 4 feet to a tempo is a little mind-boggling. So I just sort of choose 2 beats for the walk and work with the hind legs getting in the tempo, kind of letting the front end have a little latitude to figure things out along the way. And the trot is easy. It's a 2-beat gait, so 2 beats is easy. And then in the canter, again, that's a 3-beat gait. So I actually just use the leading leg and try to find my rhythm through the leading leg of the canter. So I just use 1 beat at canter. And it's just a little easier for our human minds to cope with than the sort of rapidness of the 4 beats or the rapidness of the 3 beats. So rhythm is also equal parts self-propelled and self-controlled. It's equal parts energy and relaxation, forward energy with relaxation. It's equal parts pushing and braking. It's equal parts, what else was I going to say? Forward thrust with control over the forward thrust. So if our horse is strong with braking, but not strong with pushing, then it's hard to get a precise tempo, or vice versa. The horse is very good at pushing, but not so good at braking, then they can't hold a tempo. And the goal of self-carriage is that the longer we go, the more he holds the tempo because it's balanced and it feels easier, and the fewer and lighter aids I need. And I also always play my music or my metronome out loud because I swear the horses listen to it. So this is a great exercise for developing impulsion, really strengthening the engagement of the hindquarter, both laterally and front to back, and getting the back muscles working in harmony, getting the back to lift little by little. I don't worry too much what the neck is doing or what the front legs are doing. I stay very focused on the feeling of each stride. And he wants to be a little shorter on his right hind. That tends to be where we lose the tempo. Or as we shorten the stride around a tight turn, I have to add a little gas so he keeps the tempo when he naturally shortens the stride. And I will also at some point demonstrate this to music, but I find when the horse is learning or when we're learning or both, the beeps are a little bit easier to feel and follow. Just like everybody dances to the same song a little differently, the beeps are less sort of interpretive and a little bit more precise. So there, when he fell forward, I had to give a little bit of rein resistance and ask him not to lengthen the stride or speed up. And then as soon as I give rein resistance, he puts his neck like that, chomps the bit, drops his back, and that's just the oldest habit we've been really working to overcome. And you can see it always goes in conjunction with him losing the tempo, right? As I focus on what I feel in the saddle, what I feel with the hind leg strides, and my timing is a little bit more to the hind legs. The neck sort of comes back. He relaxes, he quiets the mouth, he can come back on a light contact, he can lengthen the neck again, or at least uncurl it. So I'll just do about 10 more minutes of this, and you kind of see it's a work in progress. It comes and goes. And all of my aids should be subtle. If my aids had to be really, really overt, then that might tell me he's not quite ready to work on a precise tempo, or that I'm way off on the tempo we're trying to work on, way too slow or way too fast. Or he needs to develop a little bit more self-control or a little bit more being self-propelled before we can refine the aids to a half push or a half halt. But you can see just a little bit of work we've done with this exercise so far. He really enjoys it because it helps stabilize the back and hindquarters a lot. The more often he's in the tempo, the more he's balancing the elements of impulsion. And this is much harder to do than just constantly holding your horse back or constantly pushing your horse forward. And no, I didn't lose the sound again. Hopefully it's still working. I'm just running out of things to say. And it might be a good video even if you look back at the one I did without the sound. I'm using the same metronome, same tempo, and maybe without the sound on some of the previous videos, you can see the relationship between how he uses his neck and how the hind legs are either in the tempo, not in the tempo, looking stable, looking unstable, looking equal and regular or irregular. Because what horses do with their head and neck has more to do with what's going on in the back and hindquarters than anything else. And so when we try to balance a horse through the reins and they're not stable through the back and the hindquarters, they have about 2 million ways they can contort their neck and be able to get the job done while they're really mechanically dysfunctional or they're really out of balance. And that's ultimately, we pay the price in vet bills for doing it that way, or we blow our horse up and they become unsafe to ride. So there goes the neck again, and you can see he's struggling behind with the hind legs. So I kind of ignore the neck. If I need the reins to slow him down a little, I'll do that, like that. Then push and try to get back in the tempo. So I think the hardest part for riders is learning to ignore what's in front of us and really ignore what's in our hands and work from our core, work from our seat, and let our rein aids and our leg aids sort of help the horse come forward into the tempo or back into the tempo in just tiny amounts. It's a very subtle thing. Whoop. There we had a spontaneous little adjustment with the right shoulder. You might feel better about that, and I find that happens all the time. As the back and the hindquarters start to fulfill their job of being the stabilizing part of the body, then all those thoracic sling muscles just sort of adjust suddenly, and horses will often get that. It feels like they stepped in a hole, or it feels like something adjusted rapidly. I don't know why it's rapid or why it happens that way, but it happens a lot, and so I just call it a shoulder clunk, but it's basically a spontaneous kind of chiropractic adjustment. And what it means is the front end is letting go of tension because the hind end is starting to do the job it was intended to do. Generate and stabilize all forward motion, right? If the hind end and the back are not doing that job, then the neck and the front legs and all the muscles in the thoracic sling have to work very hard, because if the body isn't stable somewhere, either front end or back end, there's not much in between. If the body isn't stable somewhere, then we have a complete fail. We trip, we fall over, we fall down, we fall off. So remaining upright is kind of one of the biggest jobs of the central nervous system, and it will fulfill that by any means necessary. So with this horse having a weak back and a weak hindquarter, his front end and his neck did all the work. So there I have to use the reins a little to just bring him back into the tempo as he gets a little zippy. There, and that time he didn't overcurl the neck. So that was a much better response to a little bit of light rein pressure on both reins, which is also a huge advancement for us in his rehab, because he just never could, I couldn't even hold the reins like this before without him doing that. That is his signature move, signature sign of stress. And it made rehab creative, because I really couldn't use the reins as part of the rehab without triggering that response that went all the way into him dropping the back and disengaging his hindquarters. It was never just the neck. Very good. So we'll just do a few more minutes. Ah, that time he's holding the tempo around the turn with fewer aids from me and much lighter aids. And I'm not too picky about the steering because we're just trying to get that tempo between the hind legs a little more solid. Got to bring him back a little and send him forward a little. I know, I have new tree branches in the way since the hurricanes too. Sorry, Helene went by us and then Milton sort of hit us. And so I had a week where we had no power. I had branches and limbs everywhere. Nothing, no structural damage, nothing major, but a lot of cleanup. So last week, I don't think the horses, any of the horses got worked at all. It was all cleanup. It was either hurricane prep or hurricane cleanup all week, and hurricane and sandwiched there in between. So now he's doing his signature thing. I'm going to just focus on the hind legs. And you'll see, as soon as I kind of get the hind legs back in the tempo, he'll fix his own neck. He didn't like me talking about hurricanes, I guess. I know, they're no fun. So this is not bad for a week off completely, and really only some groundwork in the past couple of weeks because of back-to-back hurricanes. And then we had our first cold front today. So we went from hot and humid and then windy and rainy into beautiful and chilly. Welcome to Florida. Oh, let's slow down a little. There we go. Just the hind legs. A little bit faster. And I really only need the reins a tiny bit for steering, a tiny bit to either shorten the stride or slow him down a little. But mostly I try to do this on as loose a rein as possible, because you can see as things start to change in the hindquarter and the back use, the neck goes all over the place. And I want him to have the freedom to either release tension through his neck, shoulders, and upper back, or explore different uses of his neck, right? So once he goes to long and low, he loses the tempo pretty quickly. When he curls his neck, usually because he already lost the tempo, but it's hard to know which is chicken, which is egg. Okay, so that's a quick update on Rafalko. We're going to continue working on this. And hopefully we get really good at the tempo. I think this is where our training focus needs to be. And now that the weather is cooled off, we might be able to play with some trot and canter again. Maybe starting on the ground, see how that goes, while we ride to a slow tempo at the walk under saddle, and start to pull those together this winter. That would be great. All right, I'm going to stop the video there.